Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, U.S. President Barack Obama comes to Israel. President Barack Obama traveled to Israel and the Palestinian territories last week in what was described as a maintenance visit and not an attempt to force the two sides back to the negotiating table. This was Obama's first visit to Israel since occupying the White House. Officials said the low-key approach gave the president a chance to hold personal conversations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas on what it would take to restart the peace process. Obama also discussed the Iranian nuclear threat with Netanyahu. The American leader believes Tehran is more than a year away from going nuclear, while Netanyahu insists the hardline Islamic Republic could have a nuclear weapon within a few months. Obama also held a town hall meeting in Jerusalem with mostly young people in an attempt to boost his appeal to a skeptical Israeli public.
Israel's 33rd government was sworn in last week after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu succeeded in forming a new coalition just one day before the deadline. The secular Yesh Atid Party and the National Religious Jewish Home Party were the last holdouts. Analysts believe that this new government, which holds 68 seats in the 120-member Knesset, will strongly support the building of Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, while at the same time focus on social and economic issues.
Pope Francis, the new leader of the world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholics, has expressed his desire to furthering good relations between Catholics and Jews. Jewish leaders welcomed the election of Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina as Pope, describing him as a man of dialogue and a friend of the global Jewish community. Rabbi David Rosen, director of the Interfaith Affairs for the American Jewish Committee, went so far as to say there has never been a pope who has had a closer relationship with the Jewish community than Pope Francis. As Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Bergoglio attended synagogue services on Rosh Hashanah. He also showed solidarity following the bombing of the Jewish Community Center in 1994, and he was involved in a joint Jewish-Catholic project called Tzedakah to help the poor.
A 71-year-old man sustained light to moderate wounds in a drive-by shooting attack by Palestinians near the entrance to the Jewish community of Kedumim. After witnesses said that the gunman fled to a nearby Palestinian village, security forces launched a search for the terrorists. And in a related story, the IDF arrested nearly a dozen Palestinians following another stone-throwing attack on a vehicle near the community of Ariel. Adva Biton and her three daughters, aged 2, 4, and 6, were injured when she lost control of her car and crashed into a truck after coming under a barrage of rocks thrown by Palestinians. The youngest child was rushed to hospital in critical condition. The driver of the truck and a bus driver were also injured in that collision. A senior IDF officer described the incident as a terror attack like any other. The Army says that there's been a 50% increase in the number of rock-throwing attacks by Palestinians since the announcement from U.S. President Obama that he was coming to Israel.
The top intelligence officer of the Israel Defense Forces said Iran does not believe the international community has the resolve to launch a military strike against its nuclear facilities. However, Major General Aviv Kochavi told the Herzliya Security Conference that there are those in the upper echelons of the Iranian government that are saying perhaps it is time for Tehran to rethink its drive to acquire nuclear weapons in the face of ever-increasing sanctions, which are taking a toll on the Iranian economy and society. But the IDF intelligence chief stressed that the Ayatollah remains committed to the development of nuclear weapons, spreading what he called the gospel of the Islamic Revolution and a devotion to terror worldwide.
Major General Kochavi also spoke about the threat posed by the disintegration of Syria. He believes that embattled President Bashar al-Assad is preparing to make use of his chemical weapons, but has not yet given the order to do so. The head of Israeli military intelligence said that Syria is no longer a whole country and reported that Assad's Air Force flies 40 to 50 sorties a day against civilian targets. The Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror organization is providing assistance to the regime in the form of operational plans, soldiers, intelligence, and money. In return, Hezbollah has been given access to advanced Syrian weapon systems.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency confirmed that one of its employees died after his home in Syria was shelled during the escalating war between opposition forces and troops loyal to President Bashar al-Assad. This is the sixth UNRWA staff member to be killed during the Syrian civil war. Meanwhile, the UN Observer Force on the Syrian side of the Golan Heights announced it was ending patrols and closing a number of posts in the buffer zone between Syria and Israel, following the kidnapping of 21 Filipino peacekeepers who were abducted and later released by Syrian rebels. Croatia, Canada, and Japan have already withdrawn their troops, fearing they could be caught up in the bloody conflict.
Egyptian filmmakers have expressed outrage after security officials in the Arab country banned a documentary about Egypt's once thriving Jewish community. Producer Haytham El-Khamisi accused security services of trying to terrorize thought and repress creativity. The movie, titled The Jews of Egypt, focuses on the lives of the country's estimated 65,000 Jews and harmonious atmosphere that existed during the 1950s before Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power. Jews were then subjected to harassment, persecution, and direct expulsion. The film's director, Amir Ramzi, said that he wanted to explore how the Jews of Egypt went from being partners in the eyes of the Egyptians to enemies.
Human rights groups and women's organizations from the Arab world expressed alarm after some Arab governments announced their opposition to a UN statement denouncing violence against women. Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood criticized the UN document, saying it was deceitful and clashed with Islamic principles and that it undermined family values. Arab women responded by accusing Arab leaders of using customs, tradition, and religious considerations to justify discrimination and violence against women and girls.
Britain's Labour Party has taken the unusual step of suspending one of its lords after he alleged that a Jewish conspiracy was behind his conviction for dangerous driving. Pakistani-born Lord Ahmed, one of the first Muslim men appointed to the House of Lords, slammed into a parked car in 2007, killing a 28-year-old man. Lord Ahmed served 16 days in jail after he admitted to sending and receiving text messages just before that deadly crash. He told a Pakistani television station that the judge who sentenced him was appointed to the High Court after he helped a Jewish colleague of former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Ahmed said that he also believes a previous trip he made to the Hamas-run Gaza Strip drew the ire of Jews who own television stations and newspapers. Lord Ahmed was suspended last year when it was alleged that he offered a £10 million reward for the capture of American Presidents George Bush and Barack Obama. He was reinstated after authorities were unable to prove those accusations.
A new Gallup poll reveals that Americans favor Israelis over Palestinians by a margin of 64% to 12%. The 64% figure ties the highest that Gallup has recorded during the last quarter of a century, equaling a survey taken back in 1991 during the first Gulf War. The findings also indicate that Republicans are substantially more likely than Democrats to sympathize with Israelis, 78% versus 55%.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in another beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Jeff Dowby, that is director of the Zionist Organization of America Israel branch. Jeff, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh.
Jeff, please explain to our viewers, what is the Zionist Organization of America?
Josh, the Zionist Organization of America is the oldest Zionist organization, founded in 1897 in the United States, and its mission since its founding has been to not only promote Zionism, but also to promote a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. We have many branch offices in the United States. We are there to educate the American public, to educate on college campuses, to educate in Congress about that strong U.S.-Israel tie.
You know, we've seen in America a lot of the mainstream Jewish organizations have become more liberal in their political thinking. Yet the ZOA, or the Zionist Organization of America, has really held to its line of, the State of Israel, the Judea and Samaria, all the different things that it was supporting since the end of the 1800s. Why have you held to those convictions throughout all these years?
It's a very good question, Josh, and I think that the answer to that, if you will, is that we really have not shifted all that much. We have stayed true to our ideals of supporting the people of Israel and the land of Israel, and see the land of Israel as integral to the growth in Israel. The difference is, I think, that the rest of the political bell curve has shifted. We haven't shifted. We have stayed true to our ideals, but I believe that the rest of the political spectrum has changed. So we are simply staying true to those ideals, to those principles, to those values that has brought Zionism to where it is today. And I think you can just look out behind us, in front of us, and see where it has brought us to a great place.
A lot of the mainstream Jewish organizations were supportive of the Oslo Accords in the early 90s, yet the ZOA was a very vocal opponent of them. Why do you believe that the Oslo Accords was a mistake, and have you been vindicated?
Okay, just let me tweak that question slightly. We did not come out in 1993 foursquare against the Oslo Accords. We try as much as possible as an organization to support the government of Israel, and we hope that we can do that all the time. What we did do was we said, okay, if these agreements were signed, then it is very, very, very important to comply to those agreements. And what ended up happening, we found in the mid-1990s, is that the other side, the Palestinian Authority, did not comply. We were understood to be against the Oslo Accords only because we were insistent on the other side complying, and we found that their media, their textbooks, everything was rife with not only anti-Israel incitement, but also anti-Jewish incitement. That's why we appeared to be against the Oslo Accords.
One of the things that's interesting about the ZOA is that for over a decade now, there's been a real strong cooperation with Christian friends of Israel, Christians who support Israel. Why do you think there's such a natural alliance between the ZOA and Christians who love Israel?
Well, I think that from my experience, and before I moved over here, Josh, my experience was that in lobbying in Washington, or advocating in Washington, educating in Washington, D.C., and on the college campuses as an educator, found that there was a natural affinity between the Christian community, between Christian advocates, Christian Zionists, and the ZOA. We seem to both realize through our, let's say, biblical connections, that the land of Israel was integral to this Zionism that we have been talking about over the course of the past century plus. So I think that there was a certain natural partnership. I found that the Christian advocates in Washington were on exactly the same sheet of music as we were. So it's just seemed to be a natural partnership. We work very closely with the Christian community here in Israel as well. It just seems like a perfect match.
What's in store now for the ZOA? What are some of the initiatives that you're working on today?
Okay, as we look out here, if we just look over the hillside behind us, you would see the Mount of Olives. That is a site that is holy to both Christians and Jews. There is the oldest, there is the most historical, the holiest Jewish cemetery. It houses 150,000 Jews, quite a community by Israeli standards. Some of our greatest luminaries, some of our greatest prophets, a prime minister, Nobel Prize laureate. We're working with the Jewish organizations and also the Christians in order to make sure that the Mount of Olives is a safe and secure place, because unfortunately some of our neighbors have been involved in violence up there, so that mourners, so that worshipers, so that visitors can visit the Mount of Olives in peace and serenity and security. That is one of the issues that we are doing Why are we doing that? Because the ZOA stands for the Zionist Organization of America. There are a disproportionate number of Americans that are buried there. That means that there are an unusual number of Americans that go to visit and could be subject to violence up there. So it becomes our issue.
Jeff, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think that the message to the viewing audience, to all of my Christian friends out there, is that they should continue to support us, that they should enhance that supportment. We are here for them. If they would like to contact the ZOA, www.zoa.org. They can also contact us by email at email, that's email, at zoa.org. Contact me personally as well here in Jerusalem. We are here. We are ready to work with the Christian community to improve our Zionist environment here in Jerusalem and here in Israel in general.
Thank you, Jeff, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
More than 1 million Jewish children have been killed by abortion in Israel since 1948. Israel is currently engaged in a demographic war for its very survival as a Jewish state. Imagine what a difference 1 million more Jews would have made for Israel. Friends of Efrat saves the lives of thousands of children every year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Since 1977, Efrat has saved over 30,000 lives and is recognized as a world leader in preventing abortions. You can play a major role in Israel's survival now by helping us save Israel's unborn children.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
It's called the long goodbye, an illness whose victims slowly waste away, a process often harder on the family than it is on the patients themselves. It's Alzheimer's disease, and as life expectancy in Western nations grows longer, more and more people throughout the world will be affected. These patients at an Alzheimer daycare clinic in Jerusalem appear to be normal and happy, but they are acutely affected by the disease. Their symptoms include confusion, irritability, trouble with language, and memory loss. As the disorder progresses, victims often withdraw from family and society, losing the ability to identify even their loved ones. Gradually, bodily functions are lost, ultimately leading to death. But now, an Israeli innovation is offering new possibilities for Alzheimer's victims and their families. It works by magnetically stimulating areas of the brain most affected by Alzheimer's, reconnecting disconnected brain cells, and improving blood flow. But the key is combining the magnetic stimulation with cognitive exercises.
Combining these two together creates a long-lasting change in the brain connectivity and the brain plasticity. This is very significant from the clinical point of view, and it far exceeds what's currently available with the medications they have today.
Professor Jose Rabeh, Chief of Neurology at Asaf Harofeh Medical Center outside of Tel Aviv, has been supervising clinical tests on the device.
It's a completely new and different approach, non-invasive and painless, for the improvement of the cognitive functions and, as a consequence, the activities of daily living of Alzheimer's patients.
Trial participants undergo an MRI scan of the brain to pinpoint affected regions and then undergo treatment for 6 weeks. The system has already undergone 3 successful clinical trials, 2 at Asaf Harofeh and 1 at Harvard Medical School. Participants will return to a cognitive state comparable to up to 2 years before treatment.
How did it change my life? Oh, I feel better than before. I can talk with everybody without losing my mind, and I don't know who is or what happened.
Suddenly she improved, and it was like before the disease started. And concerning the names of the family, she used to change sometimes the children, etc. Now she recognized them back, and this is very important for them.
Alzheimer's is a rapidly deteriorating disease, and if you can preserve the status of the patients for several years forward, then it means a lot to them and to the families.
The company hopes to expand its clinics by the end of the year to Europe and Asia, and to get FDA approval by 2014 in order to establish U.S. clinics as well. New hope for patients and their families who had all but given up hope for treating this devastating disease.
טוב, אני מקווה שמחלימה עכשיו, לאט לאט. או איזה חיוך יפה יש.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
At this time every year, Christians and Jews prepare to celebrate one of the most important festival seasons. For the Jews, the Feast of Passover represents the redemption of the firstborn from death and the liberation of the people of Israel from Egypt. For Christians, this season symbolizes redemption from death, sin, and bondage by the shed blood of Jesus at the cross.
We are here in Jerusalem at the Garden Tomb. Right behind me is the place which symbolizes for millions of Christians around the world that place where that old rugged cross was standing. The event took place here which transformed the lives of millions of believers all over the world. Here, just a few hundred meters from our place, is the Temple Mount. It was 2,000 years ago on Erev Pesach, the evening of the Passover festival. Thousands of Passover lambs have been slaughtered. And exactly at the same time, on Calvary, Jesus was hanging at the cross and dying for the sins of the world. Jesus was our Passover lamb. That's why John the Baptist, when he saw Jesus approaching the river of Jordan, he cried out and said, "Behold, the Lamb of God, which would carry away the sin of the world." It is this message of the cross which symbolizes the core message of our Christian faith. For Paul, it was the central message which he was carrying all over the world. Paul was writing to the church in Corinth. He says, "When I was among you, I was determined to not know anything beside Jesus Christ and Him crucified." Paul understood that the cross of Jesus Christ resembles and symbolizes the power of God, which changed the lives of millions of people all around the world. You might ask yourself today, why was it necessary for Jesus, the Son of God, to die such a gruesome death? The answer is simple. God was looking for a family. God wanted to have fellowship with human mankind. Like He had fellowship with Adam and Eve in Garden Eden, He was looking for daughters and sons to fellowship with. And here lays the problem. Our human hearts are not ready for such a noble fellowship. Our human hearts might be full of good intentions. We want to do good. We want to bless others. We want to be people which like God and also are liked by other people. But there is something in our hearts which constantly drives us to do the things which we actually do not want to do. That's why the prophet of Jeremiah says that our human heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? Nobody has to teach his children to do evil or to be disobedient or even to be rebellious, but it is something which is in our lives from the very beginning.
The Lord looks down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there are any who understand, who seek God. They have all turned aside, they have together become corrupt. There is none who does good, no, not one.
No one is fit to meet the righteous requirements of God. We all have sinned, and each one needs the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. And exactly here comes the power of the cross into action.
He has made you alive together with Him, having forgiven you all trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and He has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross.
It is here at the cross where all the righteous requirements of God have been met. A wonderful exchange took place here at Calvary. God's righteousness actually became our own righteousness. And not only that, here we find forgiveness of all our sin, past, present, and even future. And exactly because of that reason, we can enter freely into the presence of God. And this is also what qualifies and makes us able to become part of this heavenly family of God. May the Lord bless you here from Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.